Hi, I'm your Gemini friend. Okay, this video is going to be about composite charts, which kind of seems simple on the surface, but I realized once I started to put stuff together for this video that I have a lot to say about it. This is actually a subject with a lot of layers. So while I intend for this to be a technical understanding of composite charts and how to use them, it's also going to be just amusing and my perspective on them. And I will say, I do offer personal natal chart and synastry readings. I don't offer composite chart readings, but I do have a reason why, and I am considering it. I just haven't figured out the sort of way that works for me, but I'll explain that in a little bit. Because first I want to talk about what composite charts even are, because this is a different way of looking at a relationship than synastry. It seems more straightforward, like I said, more simple, and it kind of is, at least as far as interpreting and reading them. But the very idea of a composite chart is pretty deep, because what it looks like is another natal chart, but it's a natal chart that's taking the midpoints of two people and essentially creating a combined chart. And this is the chart of the relationship. So this can show you shared goals, shared issues, the very core wounds that you have together. And why that's different from synastry is because synastry is complicated. You're getting two sides of a story. You're seeing what parts of one person and the other person are clashing or working together. There are so many more things to look at. And that's why composite charts can be a great beginner tool to relationships, but okay, this is when I'm gonna say why I don't offer composite charts alone. I have never found it to be as useful as a synastry chart, but I've always found it to align with a synastry chart once I already know somebody's synastry. Particularly for doing readings for people that I don't know, I wanna get a clear idea of both sides of it and both people's individual energies before I read a composite, because the composite chart is kind of biased in a positive way, just inherently, if that makes sense. And by that, I mean, it's not showing you nearly as many of the issues, the interpersonal dynamics, and the stressors from each individual's perspective. It's showing you a combined version of those issues, which can be incredibly useful, but entirely different. So I am thinking about doing synastry composite combinations where I read the synastry and then move into the composite. But for me so far, I've just found it to be a little too simple to start off when the relationship is new to me energetically. However, this is more about experience and what I'm used to. So I might try looking at more composite charts of people that I don't know that well and seeing, just for my own sense of confidence, how well I can interpret that. Because I'm sure that I can, since I've found reading composite charts to actually be just as intuitive as any other chart. But there's something about it that feels a little bit like I'm missing something. There's something I need to look at first, but maybe I'll change my opinion on that. I just think that composite charts for a relationship, it's not a good standalone for me. But if you read only composite charts, or if you prefer composite charts, I am so curious as to why. Because I tend to go with the most complicated route. And something about that, it satisfies the Virgo in me that wants to know everything and make sure that I've got it right, Okay, so let's get into a little more deeply, what is a composite chart? I said that it's taking the midpoints of each person's placements and just putting that placement in between. If one person's sun is in Gemini and the other's is in Libra, in the middle, they're gonna become a Leo sun. So all of the planets are going to be like that. And the generational or outer planets that take a longer time to move through the signs are likely going to be in the same sign unless you two were born very, very far apart. So there will likely be some redundancies within the individual natal charts, but it's just a sign of when you were born and more generational issues. And something very key about this. So when it comes to the house system for a composite chart, traditionally, you're supposed to use a non-quadrant system like whole sign or equal houses. I'll link a video in the description about house systems and how I feel about house systems, but I just want to say I have read in Placidus, in Koch, composite charts, and it's been exactly the same. It's just as intuitive. And the reason why it's supposedly better to use a non-quadrant house system for reading a composite chart. This is because a composite chart, it's theoretical. It's different from a natal chart where you're taking the location that somebody was born, the time that they were born, and that's a major factor because it determines the size of the houses, it determines so many little things, especially the angles, which make up the quadrants. But when creating this theoretical chart, we're using more theoretical house systems that are not relying on that time and that place in the same way. So things like Placidus, like Koch, like Regiomontanus, they are essentially treating the composite chart like it was somebody who was born on this planet. And it's giving you a little bit of nuance in the way that those house systems do. So whether you prefer to read it with one house system or another, it's totally up to you. House systems are intuitive, and this rule, it's not an empirical rule, okay? That's a philosophical rule. This is just the idea of this is a theoretical chart, so use a theoretical house system. But do what works for you, and please tell me what works for you, because so often I run into these traditional rules and like it'll be something that I didn't even know when I started reading it, and I've been intuitively reading it and it just works for me. So while I'm sure there are always reasons, I am a rule breaker and I will never stop doing that. I'm gonna move on to how to read a composite chart, because you really do read it the same way as a natal chart, but you're taking into account that this is a relationship. It's not just one person's psychology. You think of it as like an energetic field that you're stepping into of those two people's combined energies. So it's gonna have a sun, moon, rising, all the other planets in houses, having aspects, and it can even like grow like a person does. But to get a little bit more specific, looking at your composite sun, this is gonna show you the central focus or even the purpose of the bond itself. Kind of like the major personality trait that you are both embodying. So the sign it's in, it's like the personality of the relationship. In the house, major focus. This is where the idea of like the relationship itself is kind of thriving. And then looking at the moon, this is the emotional body of the relationship. This is where you connect emotionally. This is the personality of your internal, private, more feelings focused understanding of the relationship mutually. So the sign is going to show you how you two process your feelings together, and the house is going to show you primarily where this takes place. What area of life are you processing these feelings through? And of course, like all major emotional focuses. And the angles themselves, especially the ascendant and the midheaven, this is more about the public view of the relationship, how you are approaching life, how you're coming across, which can be super interesting because it's like how other people see you when they're not privy to those things that you don't share. Of course, Mercury is communication, Venus is love and values, Mars is like your motivation, your drive together, and Jupiter is where fortune lies between the two of you. But Saturn, this is your long-term potential and sort of the glue between you, what is holding you together. And looking at the aspects to Saturn can let you know if this is a stressed part of the relationship or not. Uranus deals with the way that you're moving forward together, the way that you innovate things together, and even your role within the community. Neptune is your shared spirituality, the depth of your connection, and also illusions, ways that you confuse each other. I'm clearly just glossing over these. Pluto is where you grow together, the ways that you are transforming and evolving together. And also potentially the major focuses of like power struggles and control issues within the relationship. But when it comes to the North and South Node, these are super interesting because we all have our individual North Node, and when you have a composite node with another person, it's what you're doing together, what you have to fulfill together. And you're gonna have a composite North Node with every single person. So don't let that make you feel trapped, like you have to achieve this one thing within this relationship. But if you feel called to move forward with another person, then this shows you like, what are you doing here? What are you achieving here? What do you need to move towards in order to balance you both out, where you're coming from, what you've already built up in past lives? That's your South Node, and it's equally important. We don't want to ignore our South Node. We appreciate it and we move in the opposite direction to balance it out. So once you've looked at all of your placements and interpreted them in the sign and house and gotten sort of a general feel of the relationship's personality and all of these aspects of the relationship, then we look at actual aspects, and the aspects between the things going going on in our chart, they can be so interesting because I find that the most significant, the strongest hard aspects, or especially if you have any aspect patterns like T-squares, even a grand cross, the more difficult aspects, these show you both of your version combined of what the core thing is in the relationship that is pushing you forward to grow. Because tension within a relationship, it's always pushing us to try to make it feel better, but we're not always aware of this. So seeing hard composite aspects, I love it because it's like where you're able to meet in the middle for something that for each of you, it might be something totally different. But when combined, it really shows you what's going on and what can potentially be done about it. And of course, harmonious aspects and harmonious aspect patterns are going to show you talents that you have together and ways that you really encourage each other naturally, the flow, all of that. And I swear, I'm not trying to rush through this. These are the sorts of things that composite information are always going to go over. It's not hard to find. And I figure that most of you probably already know how to interpret natal chart placements. So if you don't, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's just that when we are getting into astrology, you typically want to look at your own natal chart first before you go looking at other people's or at composite charts. Because one thing with the composite chart, you do not want to do this if you're not totally sure about the birth time. And you do whatever you want. But if you don't know somebody's exact birth time, you might not be getting the composite chart right, and that can be really critical within this. And there are things that you're going to be able to see, and things that you're going to be able to intuit. So trust yourself first, but do be careful with really interpreting anything serious or intense when you're not totally sure about the birth time. Just kind of a general astrology rule. And one thing that is so fascinating to me, this is not just about romantic relationships. None of this ever is. You can do synastry with anybody and composite charts with anybody. But what I found is so fascinating is sibling composite charts. Because when I look at my composite chart with my younger sister, I can see the way that our childhood shaped us, what we have in common, and it like shows you what about your upbringing really impacted you. So much that it impacted your siblings as well. And I've been considering for a long time making a video about family charts and looking at your parents and seeing what you get from them. So if you're interested in that, it's messy, it gets confusing, there's so much to look at, but I would love more data and I'm heavily considering that. And another thing that you can do within the composite chart is use transits. You can see what transits are impacting what parts of the relationship, which is incredibly useful, like when things feel difficult or confusing, or when you just want to be prepared. So what are the ways that composite charts are useful other than what I've already gone over? This can show you very clearly what this relationship is here to teach you, to create together, or even what you're meant to resolve with another person. Because sometimes the differences between this and our own personal natal chart, it'll bring up things that we don't even realize about ourselves, something that maybe the other person's energy pulls out of us, or something that we only get in combination. It doesn't always align with our personal desires. And sometimes you can even find that your synastry is really good, but your composite is more difficult, or the other way around. And I'm curious about that. Just if any of you have any information that you'd like to share with me, comparing your composite and your synastry, like what are the differences that you sense? And also in composite, you can see karmic things. You can see soul ties that you have with somebody. Like, say for example, if within the composite chart, your south node and your moon are conjunct, or if Saturn is aspecting the nodes in some way, there's something going on deeper there. And one thing that I love this. Okay, so you know how we're kind of different with different people? It's not about not being yourself, and it's not even entirely about things that we intentionally change when we're around other people, but we truly pull out different parts of people, and ourselves are pulled by others. And that's because when you're together, you kind of become this chart. You become your composite. And of course, you're going to be individuals. Both are true at the same time. But thinking about it in these terms is very interesting because it can show the things about you that change, or about them that change. For example, I earlier used the composite sun, Gemini, Libra, becoming Leo. I mean, that was personal. With my partner who is a Libra, I become so much more confident, creative, actually able to tap into that Leo that is like totally a problem sign for me. I just feel stronger. But the opposite can also happen. You could be in a very confident or like a good sign for you, and with somebody else, you become a sun that you find that you have difficulties with, or a sign that expresses itself in a way that you don't prefer, or a more insecure way, or your version of that. You know, it's so interesting. And you can even see your patterns within composite charts. Like for me, I don't have a lot of Pisces within my natal chart, but I have Pisces in like every composite chart within the people who are close to me. So it feels like other people pull that part of me out. So anyway, just to kind of wrap up the difference between why Synastry is useful and why composite is useful, but how they're very different. Synastry is often more focused on like pain points within people and lessons within the relationship, even ways that we trigger one another. Very much taking the energy of both people and figuring out like, how do we compromise, or all of the questions that can come up. Does this even work? Is this worth it? Or how do I handle this person when I want things to work? It can make you aware of what's going on with the other person, how it's impacting you and them. And sometimes just that awareness is enough to understand like what's really going on here. And I mean, I have an entire video on Synastry that I'll link in the description too. But you're getting a lot of information at once because you're getting two completely different people's stories, their whole story, and all of the energy that comes with that. So it can be a complex thing to like dive into, but people are complex and relationships are complex, and I think that they deserve the complexity of a Synastry chart. Composite charts show more like, what are these people building together? Who do they become when they are around one another? Where are they going? Why does a relationship exist? But it can kind of smooth out extremes, which I feel like, you know, some tension, it gets lost. Little details will get lost. And obviously I care so much about little details, but sometimes you don't want to have to focus on all of that, and you want to get a picture of like, okay, but who are we? What are we doing here? And the issues and that kind of background noise can fade away with a composite chart. And you're sometimes even able to see a more idealized version of the relationship, and it can show you what to work towards. So none are better than the others. There are so many different types of charts that we can look at. It's just important to recognize when to use them and how to use them, and also how to validate both and combine them in a way that's honest and preserves both people's integrity. So things like this, relationship work, I mean, we always want to be caring and respectful of both parties. And the composite, I mean, if you're one of the parties, you're including yourself. And there's something so significant about that combination, the merging of two people, even if it's non-romantic. We are meant to be bouncing off of other people's energies because we get something out of it, even if sometimes it's hard. We're all individuals, but the relationship is like an entity within itself. And within the context of both individuals, I think it's just such an interesting thing to look at. And I'm curious about your experience with this, what you've noticed. And like, do you have a preference? Do you prefer your composite chart to your Synastry chart with somebody? All of that. So thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you, and I love you. Bye.